Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Stacy. Now today's video is going to be my January wrap-up. So essentially all the books I read in January. So if you have been following me for a bit now, you will know that I had challenged myself to read 30 books in 30 days for the month of January. And I'm sure a lot of you are wondering how it went. If you haven't seen any of my videos, whether it be my challenge or my vlogs, I highly suggest that you do. I will leave links for all my videos in the description box below. Yeah, so I guess a lot of you are probably sitting on the edge of your seat wondering whether or not I was able to complete my 30 books in 30 days. So are you ready to find out? Drum roll, please. So, the number of books I read in my challenge for 30 books in 30 days. Are you ready for this? I read 30 books, guys. Yay! Happy dance! Ooh, 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 ooh. Yeah, so I'm like super proud of myself. 30 books. Mind-blowing. I'm shocked that I even attempted to do this. I am over the moon that I was able to accomplish it. I honestly thought I had set the bar too high, that I would never be able to pull this off. But you know what? It just goes to show that if there's something that you want in life, you put your mind to it, you can accomplish it. So my message for any of you out there watching, whether it be something to do with your personal life or with books, set yourself a goal, and if you want it bad enough, you can do it. Don't ever say you can't. Okay, so what I've done with this video is the very beginning is going to be all my stats from the 30 books that I read, and the second part of this is going to be taken from each week of my vlog. If you watched each one to the very end, I basically had a wrap up at the very end, giving you my thoughts and feelings on the books and my star ratings. So what I've done is I've just taken those clips and I'm going to put them in the end of this video. So if you've seen all of that, once you hear all the stats and stuff, you're free to go, I guess. No, so mainly this video is for anybody who, just wasn't interested in reading the vlogs, but they wanted to hear what I read and my thoughts and my star rating. So yeah, that's what this video is for. Okay, so one thing I thought was really important was the number of pages I read. And I had a goal of, I didn't want to just read these like super short books, because essentially anybody could do that. I could have found 30 books that, were only 50 pages long. I'm sure I could have come up with 30, but that wasn't the point of the challenge. What I did was I looked up the average length of a book, and it went anywhere between 250 to 300 pages. I thought 300 sounded pretty close to what it should be for the average book, so my goal then was to read 9,000 pages. But obviously I read some super short ones and I read some long ones. I ended up reading 6,077 pages, which, you know what, to be honest, that's pretty damn close to 9,000, so pat on the back. I thought it'd be kind of fun to kind of show you where my star ratings went. So I had, sorry if you see me looking down, I don't have a good memory, it's all written down. Okay, so anyways, I read 7 5-star books, I read 15 4-star books, I read 7 3-star books, I read 1 2-star book, and I read 0 1-star books. So I thought that was pretty good. I'm either really generous with my star ratings, or I just happen to read a lot of good books. I thought we'd start with the crappy one first. So my least favorite book is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I remember like when I finished reading this, and I always try and go on Goodreads and kind of put in my rating right away. And at the end of it, I didn't like it. And I decided I was going to give it 2 stars. So then I go on Goodreads and realize that the average rating for it is 4 stars. And I'm like, Did I miss something? Is this the same book? Like, I just didn't like it. Guess that's the way the cookie crumbles. Okay, so my favorite book was A Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds, and I highly recommend, if you have not read this one yet, you need to go out and pick it up now. It's a very important story, a very powerful message. I think everybody would love it. Okay, and I just want to quickly take a few minutes to just kind of discuss some of the positives that actually came out of me doing this challenge. And number one was that I was able to read a 300-page book in one day. For me, that's huge. I'm not a fast reader. It was just, you know, I'm like so proud of myself just for being able to do that. Another positive that came out of this is that I kind of picked up a genre that I absolutely hated. Like, have not read it since school. So I don't know what, over 20 years ago? It'd be more than 20. Maybe 25. This is a genre that I absolutely hated. But I picked up a poetry book. And you know what? I loved it. And the last positive I want to talk about is something I actually had talked about earlier in the video. And that's just basically, you can do anything that you put your mind to. If you want something bad enough, you will have the drive to get it. So don't ever tell yourself, I can't do it. Because you will find a way to prove yourself wrong. I'm here to tell you. There's no way I would have guessed that I could read 30 books in a month. But here I am telling you this story. So just know that anything is possible and you can do anything you put your mind to. Okay, so that's basically all I wanted to talk about in this section. From now on, the rest of the video will just be, like I said, the videos that I had done at the end of each reading vlog discussing what the books were about, what I thought about them, and their star ratings. Okay, so the first book I ended up reading is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Now, I had never read this book before. I had never watched any of the movies, so I really had no idea what it was about. And like I said in my other videos, this book is quite the ride. Now, I felt like this book started out really strong. I was really liking it. And the further I got into it, the more confused I felt. The best way for me to describe this book is when you're having a dream and you're in one situation, and then all of a sudden you're in a totally different situation, and you really don't know how you got from point A to point B. That's exactly how I felt about this book. There'd be situations that you'd be in, and then it would just totally jump to a different situation, and I'm like, well, I don't know how we got there. I know a lot of people love this book, and they're huge fans of it, but in all honesty, it just wasn't for me, and I ended up giving it 3 stars. The next book I read is Benteen. Now, this is a story about, obviously, Benteen, and she has been accepted into this university, and nobody from her tribe or planet has ever attended this university, so it's a huge deal that she's got accepted. Now, her family and a lot of other people don't want her to go, but then Benteen decides one day that she's going to take the plunge, and she actually leaves without letting anybody know. That's basically all I can tell you at this point, because the book is only 90 pages and I really don't want to give too much away. I think this book started off really strong and I was really enjoying it. The only major issue I had with it is it was so short, and I think it would have been a huge improvement if there was more character development as well as a better plot development. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. The next book I was able to read is probably one of my favorite reads for the week. I just absolutely adored it, and that is Sam's Letters to Jennifer. So this book is about Jennifer, whose grandmother has become very ill. She's in a coma. So Jennifer goes to her grandmother's house. At this house, she finds a huge box of letters that are addressed to her, and they're written by her grandmother. And in these letters, Jennifer's grandmother reveals secrets that she had been keeping, as well as giving some love advice to Jennifer, since her husband had passed away and she was just having a hard time moving on. I really enjoy James Patterson's writing style, but at the end of each chapter, he kind of writes it in a way that you just have to know what happens next, and you just have a hard time putting his books down because you just got to read one more chapter. In all honesty, I'd really like to see him write more books from this particular genre. I ended up giving this book 5 stars. And the next book I was able to read is Push. And this is about a 16-year-old girl who, she just has a really rough upbringing. She is raped by her father. She's been pregnant by her father twice, once at the age of 12, the second time at the age of 16. Her mother is very abusive, both physically and mentally. Anyways, she knows that she needs to get away from her mother, and the only way to be able to move out is to get a job. Unfortunately, she cannot read or write, so she knows that she needs to go back to school. So basically, this book is just about her determination to want to learn to read and write. Now, the main issue I had with this book is the writing. So obviously she's, like I said, she's uneducated, and it comes across like that in the way that she speaks. There's also a point in this book where her teacher will ask her to write a sentence in this notebook, and obviously she doesn't know how to write, so basically the only thing that's written down on this piece of paper is just a whole bunch of random letters. I mean, like, they did put underneath that what she was trying to say, but I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars. Now, I was also able to read A Long Way Down, and this is by Jason Reynolds. And I read this one through Overdrive through my library, so I'll put a picture here. Anyways, this book is told in verse, which I actually have never read a book in verse before. But I honestly feel that writing this book in verse actually worked perfect for it. It's essentially about this young boy whose brother is shot and killed. So it's basically about him taking this elevator ride down, which, like I said, is only 60 seconds. And he's trying to decide on whether or not he's going to follow through with seeking revenge. So this is another book that I absolutely adored. I think it has a very strong and powerful message. I think it is a book that everybody should read. So if you haven't picked it up yet, I highly recommend that you do. I ended up giving this book 5 stars. And next I read Coraline. And this is obviously about a little girl by the name of Coraline. And she moves into this new house and she finds a secret door. So when she goes through this door, she finds that the house on the other side is exactly the same as the one she's living in. She also finds 2 people there that look identical to her parents. Now, these people promise her that they will give her everything she wants if she stays. I ended up really liking this book. It, for me, just had the right amount of creepiness. I really love Neil Gaiman's writing style. This is actually the second book I've read by him. And there's just something about his writing that there's never ever a dull moment. There's always something going on right from page 1 to the very end. I ended up giving this book 5 stars. And the last book I was able to read for the week is Everything, Everything. And I'm sure many of you know what it's about, but if you don't, it's about a 17-year-old girl. She has a disease that prevents her from leaving the house, so she's never ever left the house. But then one day she notices a cute boy that moves in next door and everything's about to change. I loved everything about this story. It was very heartwarming. I adored the characters. It was just great. I loved it. I ended up giving this one 5 stars. So anyways, I read Winkapi Midnight. Now this follows 3 different characters. Obviously Wink, Poppy, and Midnight. And basically this book is, it says here on the inside flap, every story needs a hero, every story needs a villain, and every story needs a secret. So in this book, we're just basically trying to distinguish which one is the hero, which one is the villain, and what the secret is. Now for me, I really wasn't a huge fan of this book. I didn't really like the characters at all. I found the ending to be very bizarre and very odd. I think it's a story that's easily forgettable. Now, the one thing I did like about this book is the writing style. I found it to be very poetic, and probably for that reason, I would pick up another book by this author. And I ended up giving this book 3 stars. And next I read Stargirl, and this is about a 13-year-old girl who she starts at a new high school, and she's really different from everybody else, and she kind of sticks out, and it's just really about how the other students react to her. Now, I love Stargirl's character. She's just the type of person, she didn't really care what others thought of her. She was just different in her own way, and she just, like I said, she didn't care what others thought. But she was also the type of person who was very encouraging and supportive, and you know, that person that is going to always be there rooting you on through whatever you're going through. I would love to be like Stargirl, to just be my own person and to go out in public and not worry about what anybody else thinks of me. So really, that's the moral of the story, is to just go out and be yourself, whether you're different from everybody else or not. And I think the other moral to the story is that there are going to be people out there that are different than you, and that's okay, and you just have to learn to accept them for who they are. Now, this is a book that I would highly recommend, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. And the next book I read is called Charm, and this is basically just a retelling of Cinderella, the adult version. To be honest, the reason I picked this book up is simply because of the cover, which I ended up spilling coffee on, so I ended up ruining it, but that's okay because I really didn't like this book. For me, it was just average. It was just okay. There was nothing mind-blowing about it. It was just there. It's definitely not a book that I would reread again. Now, there is times in this book where it's a little bit sexual in nature, and to be honest, I don't think it was necessary. It just seemed to be very random and sporadic. I didn't find it necessary, and I almost think it would have been better without it. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. And next I read Sea Prayer, and this is an illustrated book, and it's in response to the refugee crisis. And this is a letter that a father has written to his son on the night that they're going to flee their country. Now, this book was pretty short, and it was only 50 pages, but let me tell you, it packed one heck of a powerful punch. It was just very moving, very powerful. My only issue with it is that I really wish it was longer. I felt like I was just getting into it, and then it was like the end, and I'm like, no! But definitely well worth the read, and I ended up giving this book 4 stars. Now, the next book I read is called Sold, and this is about a 13-year-old girl who is sold into human trafficking. So definitely a very heartbreaking story to read. Now, this book is classified as nonfiction, but we all know there is a lot of truth to this story. It happens, unfortunately, on a daily basis. Now, I also found out that there is a movie of this, so I'm hoping to find myself a copy and so I can read it, because you know me, I like to read a book and then watch the movie. That's my thing. Yes, so definitely a very heartbreaking book. I feel that it's a story that's not for everybody. So I think maybe if this is a topic that you might be a little sensitive to, I wouldn't pick it up. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. Okay, so I read The Fillin Boyfriend by Casey West, and in this book we follow Gia, who her boyfriend has broken up with her in the parking lot of her prom. Her friends have never met him before. He lives out of town. I think it's like 3 hours away. She's too embarrassed to go inside. She's afraid that her friends are going to think that she's just made this guy up and he doesn't exist. So she happens to see this guy. He's sitting in his car. He's waiting for his younger sister, who is also attending the prom. And she actually asked him to be essentially the fill-in boyfriend. So this guy kind of has to go along with, you know, that he's this boyfriend that originally dumped her. And from there, this lie just kind of keeps snowballing, and I really enjoyed this book. This is my first Casey West book. I thought it was really cute, really fluffy. At first, I did not like Gia's character. I thought she was a snob and she was entitled, but it was kind of nice to see her grow and mature. After reading this book, I will definitely pick up more books by Casey West, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Okay, and the next book I read is The Ice Monster, and this is by David Williams. This is a middle grade book that also has some illustrations in it. Now, in this book, we follow 10-year-old Elsie, who is actually an orphan who is living on the streets. And then one day she reads on the front of the newspaper that there is this mammoth that is coming to the museum as a display, and he's in this big ice block. So curiosity gets the best of her and she has to go check it out. And this basically just sparks the adventure of a lifetime. Now, I definitely like this book. I'm going to start off by saying, though, that I am not a fair judge of this book at all, simply because of my age. I'm nowhere near being middle grade age, but I still enjoyed it. I love the illustrations. It was really neat to see all the things that happened on her adventure and just how creative this author was. It was just definitely cute and fun, and I would definitely recommend it. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. And next I read Suzannes Diary for Nicholas, and this is by James Patterson. And like I said in my videos before, I had read this one several years ago. I don't know, I'm guessing like 10 years ago. So anyways, in this book we follow the character Katie, who thinks she has found the man of her dreams. And then one day he just suddenly breaks up with her for no reason. He doesn't really explain why or anything. He's like, we're done. And shortly after she broke up with her boyfriend, she receives this diary, and it kind of explains why this guy has broken up with her. I love the idea that part of this book, it's not the whole entire thing, but part of this book is told in a diary format. And I don't know, I like reading books like that. It just, for some reason, really holds my attention. Okay, so this is a love story, and I have to admit it was pretty heartbreaking at times, but still just a beautiful story. And I just like how everything all just kind of comes together in the end, and it'll just grab at your heart. It's definitely a quick read too. The chapters are really short, which is, you know, typical for James Patterson, but yeah, so the chapters are short. You could just kind of like fly through them. It is one of those books that's just really hard to put down. I would definitely recommend this book to anyone who is a fan of Nicholas Sparks. But I ended up giving this book 5 stars, which I believe was my original star rating when I read it the first time too. And next I read Come Closer, and this is a horror book. And in this book, our main character, she just starts hearing like these weird noises in the house. There's like a tapping on the wall. She starts, you know, having this urge to hurt the people that she loves. One day she receives a book in the mail by accident, and it happens to be a book, it has something to do with demon possession. But she's curious, and she just kind of, you know, flips through the pages and she reads a few. And then she starts to notice that, you know, some of the things that are happening to her are kind of like listed in this book. So, you know, she's questioning whether or not she is possessed by a demon. So really, I think this book sounds super intriguing. So when I heard somebody describe it, I'm like, oh my God, that just sounds so amazing, so intriguing. I have to get this book. So anyways, based on that description, and I had heard somebody else talk about it and they really enjoyed it, and it definitely caught my attention. I'm like, I'm definitely gonna really like that book. I read on Goodreads in the little description that there's this blurb on the cover and it says that it is like the scariest book of the year. But to be honest, I did not like it whatsoever. And when you sell a book as being like the scariest book of the year and it just really falls flat, you're setting that book up for disappointment. I think I started to get really annoyed with the main character. You know that there are these things happening to you, and I mean, you know, you make no effort really to fix the problem. I don't know. I had high expectations. I thought it was going to be scary. It wasn't. So, you know, for me, it was just an average book. And I ended up giving this book 3 stars. Okay, so next I read Elevation by Stephen King. And this book is essentially about a man who He notices that every time he like steps on the scale that his weight is going down, but his body is not changing to match the number on the scale. And I mean, it just keeps going down, down, down. Like every single day he's losing, you know, at a very rapid rate. Another part of this book is that he helps this lesbian couple that they live down the street from him, and they live in an area where there's discrimination against lesbians, and you know, he just kind of helps them out. This is another book that I've seen labeled as horror, and it is definitely not. If you're a fan of Stephen King and you haven't read this yet, and you go into thinking that it's going to be a horror book, you are going to be so disappointed. I think if you go into it knowing it's not a horror book, then, and you might just actually like it. I ended up really liking this book because it just had like a really different storyline, different plot. I do find myself when I read Stephen King books that he likes to go into like really great detail, and for me when I read his books, I really have to concentrate. It takes me a little bit longer just because it's just so dense. But I didn't feel that way with this book. I actually thought it was a fairly quick and easy read. I was able to get through it in no time whatsoever. Now, I can't say that I was really a huge fan of the ending. I was really hoping for a different outcome. But anyways, I ended up giving this book 4 stars. Okay, and next I read Every You, Every Me. But to be honest, I was really nervous about picking this book up. I heard really mixed reviews, and, you know, was reading some of the reviews. I'm like, you know what, this probably is not going to be a book that I like. But boy was I wrong. So in this book, one of our main characters, Evan, his best friend goes missing. I believe her name's Ariel. Correct me if I'm wrong. But she's gone missing, and nobody knows where she is. Nobody knows what happened to her. She just, you know, she's just gone. And Evan kind of blames himself for her being missing. And then he starts receiving these pictures, and he starts finding them in other places. And they're pictures of him, of Ariel, and her boyfriend. And he has just no idea where these pictures are coming from, who's sending them, who's leaving them. It could be Ariel, it could be her boyfriend, it could be somebody totally different. So there's just a lot of mystery behind where she went, and you know, where all these pictures are coming from. I don't know, I really loved the author's writing style. For me, it just seemed very poetic. One of the things I did not like was when Evan was, you know, he's kind of thinking to himself, but you know, in the text it'll be like he'll, you know, have a thought, and then it'll have a line through it. And, you know, it kind of was annoying at the beginning. I did eventually get used to it, but I don't know. I don't think it was necessary. I don't think it really added to the story. And I ended up giving this book 4 stars. And then I read Evidence of the Affair, and this is by Taylor Jenkins Reid. For some reason, I have a hard time putting all those names together, and it doesn't come out too smooth, but you know who I'm talking about. Okay, so in this book we follow Carrie and David, and they have just found out that their spouses are having an affair. Carrie's husband is having an affair with David's wife. Make sense? So basically there are letters written back and forth to each other between Carrie and David, and they're just kind of like talking about what the heck's going on and what they should do. So essentially this whole book is written through letters. Now I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I think you're a pretty good author when you can write such an intriguing and heartwarming story, something that catches people's attention. If you can do that in a short story, you're definitely an amazing author, and like I said, I ended up giving this one 4 stars. And next I read And the Ocean Was Our Sky, and this story is told from the perspective of a whale. Now, this whale is an apprentice as a hunter, so essentially he's hunting humans. So this is basically a retelling of Moby Dick, just with the roles reversed. First of all, I just want to give credit to Patrick Ness for coming up with a story that was, I found it to be very unique and different. He's very creative. The illustrations in this book were beautiful. I love them. But for me, the story was just at times very dull and boring, and I honestly felt like I was forcing myself to finish reading it, and I just wasn't enjoying it. I don't know, maybe I missed something. Maybe because I was forcing myself to not just read it to the end, but forcing myself to read it fast so I can get my 30 books in 30 days done. I don't know, maybe because of that I missed something. Maybe I will try and return to it and see if my thoughts and opinions change on it. I don't know. But anyways, I ended up giving this book 3 stars. And next I read Fortunately the Milk, and this is by Neil Gaiman. Now this is a story about a father who, his kids need milk for their cereal in the morning, so he sets off to the grocery store to get some, and it's just basically all these adventures he goes on just to get the milk. I have yet to read a Neil Gaiman book that I did not love. To be honest, I'm going to say he is one of my favorite authors. I'm pretty sure you could throw any book at me that is written by him and I'm going to love it to pieces. I love the adventures that this father went on. They were very creative, and just, there is never a dull moment in any of his books. Another thing I wanted to add is the illustrations in this book are amazing. I just really enjoyed it, and I ended up giving this book 4 stars. Okay, so the next book I read is The Haven, and I apologize because I don't have my physical copy of it. For some reason I can't find it, and chances are I've probably already lent it out to my mom. So basically this is about a home or a hospital for children, where these children are convinced that they are ill and that they're sick. You'll never believe what I found. Ah! So I'm going to be that person that has the unpopular review. I read on Goodreads that not a lot of people like this, but I'm one of the few that actually gave it 4 stars. I feel like this book gave me the girl with all the gifts vibes. It held my attention right from page 1. I definitely was intrigued. I had to know how it was going to end. For me, the ending was shocking, but very abrupt. And I think that's the only thing that I didn't like about the book. I liked the ending, but it ended just way too quick. And I ended up giving this book 4 stars. Okay, and then next I read The GrownUp. And this is another super short book. I believe it was only 50 pages. So this is about a woman who is a fake psychic. I think that's what she is. Something like that. Anyway, she tries to take advantage of this really wealthy woman. And she kind of goes to her house because this woman is saying that there's a spirit there, or it's haunted. And this fake psychic soon finds out that she's way over her head when she gets to this house. Again, this is another super short book that packs a punch, quite a few twists and turns in just a short period of time. For me, I ended up giving this book 4 stars. Okay, so next I read The Magic Misfits. Now, I find this really hard to review simply because it's meant for middle grade. I mean, anybody can read it, but it's at, you know, the middle grade level, and clearly I'm way far away from that age group. So I do find it somewhat tricky to review. But in this book, we follow our main character, Carter, and he does street magic, but he's run away from home. And then he gets to this town and he meets up with, I believe it's 5 other kids about his own age, and they use their magic and knowledge to save the town. I give Neil Patrick Harris credit for writing this because, again, it's another book that I found to be so creative and so imaginative. I will definitely read the next book in the series, and I ended up giving this book 5 stars. I definitely think it's a book that a lot of kids would really love and would really enjoy, so I highly recommend it. Okay, so the next one I read is Milk and Honey, and for me, this is my very first book of poetry. I'm the type of person that somebody says poetry and I just kind of turn my nose up and no, just push it away. It's not my thing. but I've heard so many people talk about this and just heard a lot of, I guess both good and bad feedback on it, and to be honest, I was curious. So I thought this was actually the perfect time to read it. And you know what? I ended up loving it. So this is a collection of poetry, and it's about survival, it's about violence, it's about love, loss, and abuse. To be honest, I don't think it's a book for everybody. So take caution if you're gonna pick it up and read it. I do think though that it was beautifully written. It's definitely a book that I'm going to go out and buy and have a physical copy on my shelf so I can reread it. For me, this is going to be the book that probably gets me into reading poetry. Something, like I said, I always turned away from, so I'm like super stoked about that. And I ended up giving this book 5 stars. The next book I picked up is called A Tragic Kind of Wonderful. And can we just take a moment to appreciate how beautiful this cover is? Okay, so this book is about a 16-year-old girl by the name of Mel who has bipolar disorder. And in this book, we find out that 3 of her closest friends no longer talk to her. Her brother has passed away, and she doesn't want anybody to know that she suffers from bipolar disorder. So essentially it's about her trying to hide this from everybody and eventually having the courage to tell people exactly what she's going through. I really enjoyed this book because it made me see the perspective of our main character, what she's going through, how she feels, what's going through her mind, and it's kind of nice to understand. I think as soon as you start to understand and you see other people's perspectives, it gives you understanding, and it gives you more compassion. And just pick this book up and read it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. Okay, so the next book I picked up is called Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. And I probably should have saved this for October when, you know, it's Halloween is coming up and you read all the scary books and stuff. First of all, I want to start off by saying this book is definitely geared towards younger children, so the middle grade age. For me as an adult, it was not scary whatsoever, not even close. There's actually even a few stories in here that instead of being scary, they were kind of funny. And if you're gonna label your book scary, they shouldn't be funny. So to be honest, I was really disappointed with this book, and I ended up only giving it 2 stars. Okay, so the next one I read is Almost Midnight, and this book has actually 2 short stories in it. I adored both stories. I thought they were cute, they were adorable, they were heartwarming. If you haven't picked this up yet, I highly recommend that you do. I guarantee you're gonna love it. And I ended up giving this book 5 stars. Okay, so the last 2 books I want to talk about are actually graphic novels. And to be honest, the one here is probably my favorite graphic novel ever. So we'll start with that one first. And that's called Amulet. So after a family tragedy, Emily and Naven, as well as their mother, they move into this new house. And I believe it's the first night they're there, their mother actually gets kidnapped. So now it's up to Emily and Naven to track her down and find her. Now I feel like this graphic novel was perfect. I believe it was written for me. The illustrations are just wonderful. The storyline was perfect. It was just, like I said, it was written for me. And I'll just show you some of the graphics. If you haven't read this one yet, what are you doing with your time? Like, hello, go out and buy it, pick it up, read it, get it from the library, whatever. I ended up giving it 5 stars. Okay, and the last book that I read is Anyas Ghost. So obviously this follows Anya, and one day she falls down into this well and she meets this 90-year-old ghost, and this ghost won't leave her alone. This was very cute, a lot of fun, very humorous. I love Anya's character. The only thing I probably didn't like about it is that it's, you know, kind of black and white. I am one of those people that I think every graphic novel should be in color. But I mean, that didn't take away from the storyline. It was still a very good story. And I ended up giving this 4 stars. Okay, so those are all the 30 books that I read for my 30 books in 30 days challenge. I'm super stoked that I was actually able to accomplish this. I might not have read super long books, but needless to say, I read 30 books in 30 days. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more from me, please hit that subscribe button. Until next time, happy reading. Bye!